From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, December 4th, and you're listening to the HPS Macrocast. I'm Matt McDonald in for Tony Fratta, who's out on client business today, and I'm here, as always, with John Fagan and Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners. It is Jobs Day Friday. This is the last Jobs Day report of 2020, though I guess technically we'll get the report for December in 2021, but that'll happen in the new year. So this is a time to look back. Jobs numbers today came in at 245,000 in November. This is well below expectations. Unemployment rate actually edged down a couple points to 6.7%, which, as we talked about last Jobs Day, the unemployment rate is good, but the jobs number is a disappointment and really just reads as a regular.
And even the unemployment rate was a terrible number. So we actually lost 74,000 jobs from the household survey. So the only reason that the unemployment rate went down was because 400,000 people left the workforce. And that's, for the most part, because you had to quit your job to take care of your kid because they're not in school anymore.
Yeah. So the jobs headline this month to me is welcome to the end of the V. This is.
You also have to subtract 98,000 census workers. So the number is even worse than it sounds. It was really 150, which is below what we were doing before the pandemic. We should be adding 1 million jobs. We're still 10 million jobs below where we were before the pandemic started.
And if you dig into the numbers a little bit, you have retail lost 35,000 jobs, which is notable in that when you look at the seasonality, this is not the time to be losing jobs. The interesting
supposed to
part
add
is
like
that,
1 million jobs,
right,
not seasonally adjusted now. Yeah.
Right. The interesting part is that warehousing is up by 145,000. So
and courier jobs were up 82,000.
Yeah. So some of the electronic end of the retail sector seems to be holding up okay.
And you see the advertisements for Amazon. We're hiring. You want to come work for us? That's
right.
And then also restaurants and bars lost 17,000. And really troubling, local education lost 21,000 jobs.
So as we look at the jobs report and all these highlights and kind of a pretty ending out the year at a pretty mixed bag, how are the markets looking at this, and how should we think about this in terms of the total economy?
It's a really interesting response to some extent. The vaccine news that we got over the past month, the incredibly effective data, the effectiveness of the vaccines really across the board, and the accelerated time frame for rollout. The vaccine, we may not get herd immunity from COVID for another few quarters or maybe by the end of next year, but the markets have certainly
we're trying hard.
Yeah. The vaccine news has to some extent inoculated the markets against bad economic news. And so investors are trying to weigh this near-term dire picture that we have obviously here. And this is another further evidence of economic backsliding. And it's going to be a challenging winter. No question about it, even as the vaccine finds its way to the frontline medical workers and those most in need. But really, keeping the eyes on the horizon is what market participants are trying to do here. And so when we look at S&P 500 futures, they wobbled a little bit, but basically stabilized pretty quickly. Treasury yields are actually up. The yield curve is steepening. That is usually a sign after news like this, when the yield curve steepens. That is not necessarily that people were expecting an even worse number. It was just that they were waiting for the number to kind of get out of the way. The yields have been biased upwards for weeks now amid this vaccine news, and so it was probably just once the number hit the tape, you could go about selling more 10-year treasuries. So it's nothing
because the market thinks we're getting stimulus because the jobs number's weak.
Yeah, that's another part of it, and that's the other sort of cross current. The bad news is good news,
Right?
Atmospherics, and it's not just focusing minds on Capitol Hill. It's also building the case for the Fed to potentially do more. Chair Powell kept his cards pretty close to the vest in his testimony this week, but there's definitely a case to be made that the Fed needs to tweak and augment, add a little accommodation perhaps to try to build the bridge to next summer, next fall, when things are going to be a little bit better.
It feels to me like this is, VU blah blah blah. I'm partial to the reverse square root sign version of looking at this stuff. But however you want to think about it, it kind of feels like this jobs level kind of, it is what it is until we actually get a vaccine. Like, I'm not sure how you get leisure and hospitality, restaurants, all the rest of the stuff. Like, I'm not sure how you get true recovery in some of these sectors that have been so hard hit until people can actually go out and do things. I don't know how you
Carnival said that no cruises until they delayed it until February, March. So, I mean, they're just saying until there's a vaccine, we're not going on cruises. We're not, going to resorts, and we're not going to movie theaters. Fauci's
state. I think it was Fauci who was kind of saying, probably around April or May, you'll be able to go to sporting events. And I was like, oh, that's like how to think about this, is basically whatever.
That was really helpful.
It is really helpful.
That, like in the fall, we could have full stadiums.
Right. The sporting events right now, like going to watch a sporting event feels like the most decadent thing in the world. It sounds incredible, right?
It's scary. I can't imagine touching shoulders with a stranger. It's horrifying.
I know. Yeah, it'll be until 2022 when you can go back to Fenway, right?
Yeah. You actually have to sit on top of each other there.
Right. Yeah, when you're comfortable getting beer spilled on you again in the bleachers.
Yeah.
So let's touch a little bit on the prospects for stimulus in this context. I think it's actually, I mean, if you follow the economic policy making discussions, certainly particularly on, I mean, broadly, I think this is true, but also on the left with kind of the people who are paying attention to the incoming Biden administration and this sort of stuff. I think there's an interesting dynamic of, I think that some of the lessons of the late recovery under Trump, especially from the Fed side, are a little bit of like, hey, you can do more, keep the gas pedal down, and really have a positive impact on, say, the long tail of the employment population, right? And I think that there's a little bit of a disposition of coming in of just kind of, we can do more, accelerate the recovery, all that sort of stuff. You have that, I would say that you have that policy discussion in the ether as Congress is kind of coming back around to stimulus discussions. It feels like that the congressional discussion is trying to somehow keep the number in the, what would that be, 12-0 category?
Yeah.
Is it 12? With a B, not a T. That's where like stimulus, which honestly is reminiscent,
commas, right?
It's reminiscent of the financial crisis, but what are you guys seeing on that front, and how do you think the markets are viewing those prospects?
But it is kind of amazing when you look back, because in 2008, I think it was $900 billion.
Yes.
And so far we've done like $3 trillion, and we're talking whether we should go 500 billion or 1.5 trillion. It's amazing how in that 10 years the numbers have just become so much bigger. Though a lot of the economic research showed that we should have gone bigger in 2008, and the recovery would have happened much quicker. Correct. So we're working with that as the basis, but now we need to decide whether 500 billion is enough or 1.5. And also going back to Dr. Fauci, we do actually have a roadmap. So there is kind of a way to do some economic analysis and be like, there is a number that we need.
Yeah, the viewpoint
in a way that was not true in the spring.
Was not true in the spring, yeah.
Yeah, the viewpoint from Wall Street here is that, the Democrats, there was a question about how are these sides going to meet. And when we got that bipartisan proposal earlier this week, that $900 billion, a number that crosses the aisles and, gives everybody a little bit of what they want, but nobody gets exactly what they want.
And it seems to be getting some traction.
Yeah, so it was an important moment when Senator Schumer and House Speaker Pelosi came out and endorsed that as a basis for going forward with negotiations. That was something that analysts were a little bit concerned about, whether they were going to stay entrenched at their $2.4 trillion number. And obviously, we saw pre-election House Speaker Pelosi holding very fast to that to that number. And so that was an important concession in the view of Wall Street. And Mitch McConnell yesterday making pretty constructive statements, but not actually giving any specifics as to whether he feels the same way about using that $900 billion as the starting point.
Yeah,
because the Democrats obviously intend to go up from there, and Mitch McConnell, as you said, is clearly thinking in the B's, billions, not T's, trillions.
Yeah, and Matt, you've dealt with McConnell for a lot of your career. How do you read the tea leaves on what he's saying?
I mean, it seems to me like everybody's bringing the temperature down a little bit on where things are, and then and at the same time you also have I don't think that you can I don't think that you can discount the other aspect of government funding and that negotiation that's coming up, because that's another piece where stimulus, I would say for our world and our audiences, stimulus in how you approach the economic policy is a big deal, but it doesn't have the same kind of, public consequence or perceived consequences like a government shutdown type of thing, which I don't think anybody is really looking to have happen. So, but I mean, I also think that
can't be dismissed as a possible outcome.
Right. I would say that, that seems just crazy, right? But I would also say that like the dynamics have just changed a lot, right? So like we've talked on previous shows about, I don't know, if we had a $2 trillion stimulus or whatever, that Trump might be reelected president today.
Yeah.
So the Democrats, certainly Pelosi, had no incentive to kind of accept less than exactly what they wanted. That didn't happen. Trump didn't get reelected. And now a lot of the incentive structures have really changed.
But we still have an election going to decide the
That's true.
Senate.
That's true.
But it seems like the Republicans are holding out on doing stimulus before that election, which that still confuses me. I don't understand why giving people money is bad to get elected.
Well, it seems like there's enough common ground, even if Majority Leader McConnell wants to come in and really hold tight to that $500 billion marker that he put down again and again in the pre-election negotiations. There's still within that a decent chunk of common ground. Certainly things like unemployment benefits extension. It's
right.
hard to imagine that they couldn't do something that is, relatively small, that everybody agrees on, and then get a second bite at the apple after Georgia
I fully agree.
Has two runoffs, and
you could do the unemployment just in the CR. You could tag that on. Though, going back to the jobs report, losing 21,000 jobs in education was widespread. So you're starting to see the hurt at the state and local level, and that's been one of the things that has been that the Republicans and Democrats don't agree on. It's kind of viewed as a bailing out of the crappy states, New York and Illinois.
It really is. Man, I mean, I've recently been reading the Hamilton biography and the federalization of state debts.
Yep.
It's been a couple hundred years and we're still back where we started. It's amazing.
It's totally fascinating. And also, it's the same states that are still arguing over it.
Yeah. All right, great. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. We're gonna talk a little bit about some of the appointments and the emerging people as policy of what we see from the Biden administration. This is the HPS Macrocast.
On the first Friday of every month, HPS analyzes the latest jobs and labor market data in a digestible format. Sign up for our reports at hamiltonplacestrategies.com or on Twitter at HPS Insight.
All right, we're back on the HPS Macrocast. There's been a lot of news. Let's turn to the appointments, announcements, and emerging kind of policy players of the Biden administration. And we'll focus in on the economics side of all this stuff. Starting with the announcement of Janet Yellen as the nominee for Treasury Secretary. That confirmation seems likely to move ahead without a whole bunch of bumps. She will be notably the first woman to serve as Treasury Secretary, though she is not the first ex-Fed chair to serve as Treasury Secretary. We'll dive into that announcement and kind of the response to that in a second, but there have been a bunch of other related economic announcements, and it's worth going through those in some detail. They also announced the Deputy Treasury Secretary, Wally Adeyemo, who in the Obama administration was Deputy Director of National Security Council, and notably was the chief negotiator on TPP, which is interesting. You know, and part of the Biden announcements and stuff is that tariffs are not being lifted. So, you know, pandemic is keeping us busy, but let's not let a good trade war die. I guess that's still going on and something to pay attention to. Another big announcement: OMB, Office of Management and Budget. Neera Tanden for Center of American Progress was announced. That announcement ran into some quick problems both on the right and left. Neera is a little more political practitioner than some of the other nominees, and her announcement got some grumpiness both from kind of Bernie world and Senate Republicans. So unclear where that will go. CEA chair, the Council of Economic Advisors, which is typically, you know, proper economists. The role of the CEA is to provide good, objective economic advice to the president. Cecilia Rouse from Princeton was announced. She has a labor focus, which just coming off Jobs Day, I would say this will be needed. The other members of the CEA, Jared Bernstein, who has served as an economic advisor to Joe Biden in the past and is well known to people in DC. He's more on the applied policy side of economics. And then Heather Bauschy, she's at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. There was a little bit of rumblings on the left about her announcement. I don't know where that piece is going to go. Not announced and still outstanding is Labor, Commerce, USTR.
They asked me to do labor, but I would have to not be able to do the podcast, so I said no.
Not announced as National Economic Council. That is kind of the neutral policy, and I guess I don't think that's a Senate confirmed position, but the CEA, the NEC, and the Treasury Secretary are all important positions for any administration, in part, candidly, because of proximity to the White House. The Treasury Department is on the White House grounds, and the CEA and NEC are kind of housed within the White House apparatus. So the NEC is still outstanding, but let's go back to so that's kind of the state of play on nominations. And I think there's a lot to kind of dig into on all this, but let's go back to the big announcement of Janet Yellen at Treasury. I was looking this up. The last Fed chair to serve as Treasury Secretary was William Miller during the Carter administration, which was obviously a very different economic time with a lot of different stuff going on. But it is interesting in that she, it hasn't been new over the past decade as we, dealt with the aftermath of the financial crisis and now the pandemic, of the Fed chair doing what they can and then kind of pleading with Congress and the fiscal side of the House to do what they can. Now, to be Secretary Yellen is going to be dealing with the fiscal side, so that'll be a different challenge for her. How did the markets view this and respond to it?
Yeah, it was a 3 cheers, I think, was the response, properly characterized. Wall Street loved it. It was something that, in obviously her tenure as Fed chair, she was widely admired and her performance was really lauded in that role. So there's a real comfort level among market participants with Janet Yellen, a sense that she really has a pro-growth orientation. Her labor economics background certainly, again, it's so salient, comes into play, and will make her, align her very well with what the Fed is doing. Not that she'd be particularly prone to be well aligned with the Fed anyway, in their new formulation, which is focusing on bringing up the lower echelons of the workforce, which have suffered so disproportionately in this pandemic. And so this comes along with her demonstrated understanding of financial markets, a moderate track record on regulatory reform, and a sense that really going forward here with the kind of, as you said, Matt, the coordination between Treasury and the Fed, when you have this need for stimulus, you have very large budget deficits going forward, and this symbiotic relationship, increasingly symbiotic relationship. Some might characterize it as sort of veering. It's not. People throw around modern monetary theory, but the needle it's far from that. But the needle is definitely moving in that sort of magnetic direction. It's pretty fair to say, and it's hard to find a constituency in Washington, D.C. that isn't totally cynical for slashing the budget deficit. It's a very challenging thing for any politician to find pay-fors that are going to be acceptable. Certainly, if the Democrats do manage to take the Senate here on the river card in Georgia and pull the inside straight, that even in that circumstance, it's going to be very, very difficult for the Biden tax plan as it is today to get through the moderates in the Democratic Party. So
that's a great point, John. It's something that's not talked about, how tight the House is, and you can always pick off a couple, congressmen on a bill, and especially on a bill to raise taxes.
Yeah, and so maybe the obviously the Senate Republicans, now that the Biden administration is coming in, are sort of rummaging around in their closets to find their Tea Party uniforms and get back into the game of scolding about deficits. It's definitely something that the consensus has moved really far away from that, I think, in general. And Janet Yellen, who has in the past spoken about, she's made a lot of different comments on this front and warned about rising deficits and so forth. It'll be the understanding is that she's not a deficit hawk, and that she's made more recent comments that are suggestive of aligning with this consensus that the focus really is on not the size of the deficits, but the cost of them, the services, this debt servicing. And right now, interest rates are exceptionally low. It's hard to find anybody around the U.S. that doesn't think that investing in our infrastructure would be a bad use of money right now. It's a question of how to do it and priorities. So she's a centrist, and there's also from the perspective of the markets, what she isn't. She isn't she is demonstrating a pro-growth and moderate economic alignment of the Biden administration, which is something that was a little bit that some quarters of Wall Street had worried about.
Yeah, it's interesting from a political perspective. I think that she is, as are a number of the nominees beyond even the economic realm, is the Biden campaign, certainly post primary, had a lot of vibe of steady hand at the tiller. I think it was the Harding administration that ran on a return to normalcy back in the last time we were in the 20s, and that there's a little bit of a vibe of that too. And I think Yellen is an appointment that fulfills that known quantity. I would be shocked if she had any difficulty getting confirmed, like steadying influence, all those things that I think were a lot of the premise of both the Biden campaign and what voters said in the last election.
I think next week we should dive deeper into the Harding administration.
That's as much airtime as the Harding administration gets. That's it. One line. All right. So we are close to the end of the year. What do we have on tap coming up that people should be paying attention to?
Well, it's kind of quiet, right, John?
Well, the data is pretty quiet, but if you cast your eye across the Atlantic, Brexit negotiations, it's make or break time. It's been make or break time since October 15th, according to Prime Minister Johnson and some of the other negotiators. But as these things tend to go, it has dragged on, and we're in the 11th hour. This week is pivotal.
One of the best Twitter follows is the Northern Ireland border. Every now and then they'll just tweet, "I'm getting worried."
Yeah, there's a lot of headline ping pong. The chief EU negotiator Barnier was supposed to go back to Brussels today to brief the EU leaders about the outline for a deal, but there were some last minute dramatics, as this always goes. The likelihood is this drags out over the weekend, and the real pivotal fork in the road here is the EU Leaders Summit on December 10th and 11th, basically the end of next week. If they don't have something by then, it's going to be very difficult to ratify an agreement by year end when the UK leaves, deal or no deal. And so this is going to be a major focus. The markets are not priced for a hard Brexit. We've been in the skeptics camp, the out of consensus skeptics camp. The remaining issues that they're fighting over have been intractable for the life of this issue. The fishing rights. Yeah. France has said that they will veto a deal that shafts their fishermen, and and the French would. So you take them at their word.
Boggles my mind about this whole. They keep kicking the can down the road, and we'll figure it out. But there's like 3 or 4 things that just they can't agree on.
Still with the Brexit,
time doesn't change the fact that you can't solve the Northern Ireland border. You can't solve.
I mean, I would suggest that we do like a year in review episode, but it'd be like 5 hours long. So yeah. I don't know if we can do that.
We've also got the European Central Bank next week. That meeting is on the 10th, I believe. And ECB President Lagarde is widely expected to announce additional stimulus, an upsizing and an extension of the asset purchase program. That's what's being reported, even to a greater degree than had been expected. That's the kind of motif of the European Central Bank in the Draghi-Lagarde era, which is a bit of flair and performance that tends to dazzle the markets. And it looks like she's going to do something quite similar this week. It's been a major turnaround. Obviously, the ECB has transformed itself over the years, and the hawks, although they still have their say to a greater degree than I think currently we see at the Fed. The Fed is much more aligned, and the Fed board members that pass as hawkish would be archdoves in another era. But that's not true necessarily in the ECB. So we'll wait to see, but it sure looks like they're going to go big, and there'll be some grumbling from the or some squawking from the hawks on that side.
All right, guys. Well, that is it for this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the HPS Macrocast. I'm Matt McDonald with Hamilton Place Strategies. Thanks to John Fagan and Brendan Walsh of Markets Policy Partners. We will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.